A very warm welcome. You're joining us here at Hyde Park on Other Derana 24 and wishing all of our viewers a happy new year. And as the dawn of 2026, we record our first program for the year and to discuss Sri Lanka's way forward, the outlook for the country's economy. We're honored to have the Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka joining us on the first discussion at Hyde Park on the 1st of January 2026.
Thank you for the invitation.
And a very happy new year to you, Governor.
Thank you very much.
It has been a difficult time for Sri Lanka, 2025, but I hope 2026 you'd have a better outlook for the country and have better prospects that you can share with us as we begin the program.
Yes, I think when you look at 2025, last year, throughout the year, the economy was doing much better than we expected. For example, until Q3, growth was very close to 5%. Q4 is still uncertain because of the impact of the Ditwah. The cyclone is not very certain yet, but I hope it will be close, in my view, still will be close to 5% or a little below last year. Previous year, we had close to 5%. So before the cyclone, we had expectation from our side of central bank. We had the expectation of next several years, we have a potential to grow at least around 4 to 5%, that in our estimate. So what could be different in 2026 compared to what we thought early in terms of growth would be that because of the cyclone, and if the government going to spend money that was allocated for rebuilding, reconstruction and recovery and compensation, all these activities, that will create additional economic activities during the year, especially this year and the next year, which means in terms of economic growth, it could even be higher than the 4 to 5% what we thought earlier. So basically, but my personal opinion is that because of the reconstruction and rebuilding efforts, if those are spent properly, efficiently within a given periods, economic growth could be even higher than 5%, if that is subject to all these conditions. So it should be, because for example, without this cyclone, earlier government had allocated, I think, about 1.4 trillion for public investments. Now on top of that, going to add another 500 billion. So that should create additional economic activities in terms of special construction and some of the economic activities that can create economic growth in terms of that. But there could be other sides. For example, if the government is going to spend that much money, and there's going to be a much more demand for certain goods and services, for example, labor, construction, the materials, excess demand could create kind of a price impact also. That is going to create excess demand. Prices of those materials, some prices can also go up. That can reflect in the inflation to a certain extent. But in our view, inflation was anyway running around 2% yet. Still, our expectation from our point of view, inflation was going to reach around 5%. That's our target, somewhere in Q3, third quarter of 2026. So that probably we might reach that a little earlier than what we thought because of the higher demand factoring into inflation for 2026. The third factor that could have impact on the foreign exchange situation, for example, when the government spending more in rupee terms, that's already they have money in their accounts, going to spend that money for reconstruction and rebuilding, that could create some more additional demand for certain imports, like what we had last year for motor vehicle imports. This year there could be additional demand for imports in terms of, for example, construction, cement, steel, building materials, construction materials, and certain fuel, all these things. That would have an additional demand for foreign exchange to import all these raw materials. So to offset that, we need to ensure that we also earn a little bit more foreign exchange through exports, remittances, and tourism, as well as if the government can mobilize some more foreign exchange in terms of loans and grants to support these recovery activities, that can offset and balance that situation. So for example, so that all things will have to happen. These are the possible impacts in terms of outlook on the growth, inflation, and also foreign exchange reserves. and the imports, exports, and the imports. So that could be those imports, but we can still, it's too early for us to factor everything. There are some uncertainties, so the timing that's going to take to implement all these things, and the procurement process could be a little delayed than what we think. So as a result, it's still too early, but there should be some impact on both sides.
Governor, you mentioned that post-Cyclone Ditwah and the damages as Sri Lanka looks to rebuild, there will be spending reallocations of these budgets, and you mentioned that it should be wisely and efficiently spent. What is the mandate of the central bank to oversee any fiscal spending here?
No, fiscal spending, full responsibility is with the parliament. I don't think we have no mandate at all, because that's why independence of monetary policy and fiscal policy. Obviously, we had to have strong coordination between fiscal policy and monetary policy. That is to understand impact of higher spending by fiscal authorities on the balance of payment, inflation, as I said, on the monetary policy. But for government to spend that amount of additional money allocated through the parliament, is sole parliament oversight. As a public finance authority by the constitution is a parliament. Parliament has the oversight. That's where Committee on Public Finance and the parliament, time to time, they need approvals, all these things by the parliament, not by the central bank.
And the central bank advises the government on the way forward. As we look at 2026 and beyond, we've been talking about damages to not just houses, but large-scale damages to businesses, small and medium-scale enterprises, those who find it difficult to even go in for a loan to recover. And it's in the interest of the entire economy that they rebuild. So what's the advice of the central bank here, Governor?
No, from our side, we have already issued a circular to the banking sector for especially businesses, those who have been affected as a result of the cyclone. Then they can, I think, so government compensation is rather, I don't think any government, this is taxpayers' money, government cannot fully compensate for the whole damage of businesses. So there are several ways that can be compensated. One is a government compensation, giving some compensation. Second one, important one is if there are insurance is a very good instrument. Other than that, those two instruments is other instrument which can provide more resources from the banking sector through lending. So for that, I think what we have issued a circular is that businesses those have been affected with this cyclone, and if they find it difficult to service their already loan obligations, we have given them a 3 to 6 months moratorium, and they have to make the application of the bank and ask for time to first this settlement of the loans, the existing obligations. The second part is for them to restart the business, working capital. They can go to a bank and ask for a new loan for a working capital for them to start the business. For that also we have imposed a cap based on the current market rates. Below market rates, current market rates for $1 million is over 11%. We said new loans should be around below maximum 9%. So that is the amount of resources available for businesses for their recovery efforts from the banking side. Those are, we also will remember when banks are giving the loans, those are depositors' money. So they have to recover that money, so they have to ensure you give the loan, give them a concession, give them a period for them to recover, then after that they should be able to recover money back and pay at a concession. And there are a lot of other conditions. We say don't impose extra penalties, don't impose some of the additional interest charges. So we have issued a circular. That is from our side. In addition, government has already basically have a strong good compensation package for the losses of the houses, businesses, certain amounts. I think I'm sure you know the details of this, already published, approved by the parliament, and it was announced. So that's the second part. And third part, as I said, the insurance recoveries.
Governor, how would you assess the resilience of the country's economy as we move forward? We understand that there has been a full assessment of the damages caused, but moving forward, after multiple shocks the economy has faced and several efforts to rebuild and recover, it felt at one point that the economy went back to where we were.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. So for any economy, because this kind of crisis, so events, so this climate change can happen anytime in the future. So only way to prepare for this kind of events is to keep buffers ready for us to be used in an event of this kind of nature. So this is a best example. I can tell you first example during this period, because government earned a lot more revenue than what was expected during the last year, and they built a buffer of 1 trillion rupees in the Ministry of Finance with 2 state banks as a cash buffer. So that was a good buffer that they built, so that can be used now to recover and spend this amount, at least 500 billion out of that 1 trillion buffer can be used to support the economy for recovery efforts. For example, imagine a situation if we did not have that buffer, then we would be in a very difficult position. This is what happened in 2022 during the crisis. We did not have any buffer in terms of fiscal, in terms of external resource, in terms of inflation or monetary policy. So we had lost all the external buffers, the domestic buffers, fiscal buffers in terms of, that time government was running a close to 1 trillion deficit OD with the 2 state banks, now 1 trillion surplus with the state banks. And in terms of the foreign exchange resource, that time we had almost no usable resource. Now we have over 6 billion resource. These are the buffers. So this is the only way any country to prepare this kind of event. We should ensure that we keep building this is kind of a savings. If as a household, if you going to have an unexpected event in your family, if you didn't have savings in your bank, so you have to go through a very difficult cycle. But if you have money, then you spend that money. That is why even managing economy, key buffers are fiscal buffers in terms of the surpluses, revenue and the surpluses. From the country balance of payment point of view, foreign exchange reserves, and from the monetary policy point of view, interest rates, that low interest rates, maintaining low interest rates is a buffer. In case that's needed, we have a space to even further reduce interest rates. So we are keeping that buffer also in an event if we are to support the economy from monetary policy side. So I don't think we need this event. We don't need that, because although we have seen the damage, value of the damage of the assets is about $4 billion, but that is the value of the asset that came down because of the destruction. But in terms of economic activity, because of this destruction, there has to be a much more economic activity creating in the economy in the recovery and rebuilding efforts. That will add more value to the economy going forward.
Does this mean the Sri Lankan economy is well prepared and well stocked up, if I may say, to face any eventuality? And going forward, Governor, since Sri Lanka has faced shocks as these, what kind of policy direction or policy turn would you advise the government to take so that Sri Lanka prepares ahead for not just cyclones or any weather-induced impacts, but other possible crises?
Yeah, I think this is a point again. I think this, what I say, this time we were better prepared in terms of buffers we had. That's why the impact could be minimal in terms of for the government fiscal monetary. So, but I wouldn't say that is more than sufficient for the future. That's why it's important for us to keep building these buffers going forward in all the areas. That's why we should not be complacent because we are able to meet this shock, this point. What will happen if there's another shock? These current buffers may not be sufficient. That's why we need to keep building. That's why for some this year, on the reserve, for example, 6.7 billion kind of estimate, we need to build another about up to 8 billion by end of this year. Government also need to keep building their savings with the banks as fiscal cash buffer, so that they can use that amount of money. Continue to implement the proper prudent fiscal consolidation as we plan, and implement to proper prudent monetary policy in terms of managing inflation, implement the proper external sector policies so that we can build resource and build more buffers in terms of in shocks, say balance of payment shock. Any shock can be in the future, can be a pandemic, can be a geopolitical issue, can be a war, can be a petrol price hike, anything can happen. Only way for us to prepare is to have these buffers ready. That's why we are always talking about build resource up to 6 billion, 8 billion, 9 billion, 10 billion going forward, and maintain fiscal primary surplus 3.3, maintain the sustainability without falling into a difficult debt servicing situations, and have a proper prudent monetary policy and curtail the inflation. Maintain it around at least 5% is a proper prudent policies, both fiscal and monetary and other structural. And similarly, there has to be other structural reforms we can talk about later. So a lot of other things also will have to happen.
But when we look at the longer term economic recovery and also targets that not just the central bank but the entire economy you have set for going forward, how is this shaping out, Governor? Are we on track as planned, or has there been a deterrence? And what measures have been taken to catch up on that front?
No, so far I see there is this kind of a path is very clear. We are moving in the direction that since the crisis, the direction we have been moving, we are moving in the same direction. I don't see a deviation from all these prudent macro policies and also structural reforms. I don't see that's changing. But any time any government can change their policies. That's the right of the government elected by the people. They have right to change policies. But I hope that the right policies are right policies. I don't think there are two alternatives. This is where people need to ensure the elected government implement policy in the same direction. And obviously you can have changes here and there too. For example, if something unexpected happened, when this happened, it has to be change the course a little bit. It had to spend money that's saved for this purpose. Those things can happen. Those changes should take place to meet and rebuild. But the direction of travel should be the same. That should not be changed. For us to ensure what you're talking about, long-term economic growth as well as increasing living standards of people, that direction will have to be moving in the same direction without much change. I don't see a risk right now. No one has expressed, there's another different alternatives or different path. I don't see that.
When we talk about the private sector, it's very important that we discuss also the outlook for 2026, the economy's direction, but at the same time, how the private sectors, the conducive environment that's created is going to fare well for the economy's private entities. Are we going to look at any new changes to how economic activity or how the central bank's focus on the private sector is going to be?
I think central bank, I think in the next week on the 8th of January, we are going to announce our policy agenda, kind of roadmap for 2026. There we will explain in detail from our monetary policy point of view and some stability point of view, what are we going to do for this year. That I think once that is announced, we can have another discussion. But from the private sector point of view, what my request for the private sector is to look for opportunities coming up. For example, when the government announces that they are going to spend additional 500 billion in addition to 1.4 trillion for public investments, which means that should create a lot of new opportunities for the private sector in certain sectors like construction, road, bridges, all these things. There will be new activities. Private sector should be ready to move in and support those additional activities because resources are available. Those are opportunities for the private sector to take. That's one area. That's only for out of this thing. But more than the government activities, I would see a lot of other opportunities. For example, potential for tourism. Now we saw this last year was the highest number of tourist arrivals. I see that will continue this year also. That will create more opportunities for sectors like tourism, logistics, and also we need to explore more opportunities to diversify exports. Those are the areas that even IT, technology, AI kind of technologies, and also digitalization, those are the opportunities already government has announced. So private sector should be looking for opportunities in those priority areas and get ready to use those opportunities and create business opportunities and use those opportunities to create employment, create business for themselves and create wealth for themselves. That is how country would grow. So I think again other part is that even the government side, there are government-owned corporations. So for example, petroleum, the Sri Lankan Airlines, the RDA, all these institutions. Also, those are state-owned enterprises that could create opportunities for the businesses. So when these are expanding, obviously there will be a lot of opportunities. For example, now we know the renewable energy is one such area. The logistics and port trade services are in one such area. Tourism is another such area. Then looking for diverse export markets in the Europe or challenges in the US market, or try to basically link up with the other supply chains in the Asia. Those are the opportunities private sector should be focusing and trying to work out. And overall macro environment, business environment is much more stable now compared to, we have been talking a lot the last 2 years, the situation. Now is much more stable environment from the macro point of view. Now it's up to the private sector to take this stable situation. Stability is the foundation for growth. Stability is the foundation for economic activities for the private sector as well. So then they don't have to worry too much about the stability. Now they have to take this opportunities created by the stability to support themselves for the growth in the future.
As we move forward, do you think, as many say, Sri Lanka is too reliant on certain traditional sectors, whether it's exports of certain traditional basket of traditional items, and then we're too reliant on tourism? That is also another concern. So as we look to expand, Governor, what are really the options here? Is there room for the private sector to move, for more investments to come? How would you advise other departments, interlinked departments and entities to work so that foreign direct investment inflow is not deterred?
It's basically, there are opportunities in several areas. It's up to us to, or even relevant agencies to provide, make it easier for people to, especially foreign direct investment, to come in those areas. We should be able to open up our sectors. I think what I believe, certainly, economy can function better if you open up activities for foreign investors in all the areas. What I hear sometimes, there are concerns of opening certain sectors to the foreign investors. That should not be the kind of a concern, where if you open up opportunities for investors, they will come and invest here, create jobs, create employments, make more demand for goods and services from locally, and diversify the agriculture. Obviously, as you said, you are right. Even export sectors, we have been focusing on very limited areas. We should diversify that more into, in my view, we have potential more into export of services. And goods also, there has to be a high-end niche specialized product. That's where our advantage. We are not a country where we can compete with Bangladesh or Vietnam as low-cost destination. We are a high-end, competitive and technology-driven the sector in all the areas. That's where we need to compete, and that's where we need to promote. Those are the areas we need to open up for foreign investment, so that they will come and invest and create business opportunities for themselves as well for the country. So these are the areas, in my view. Those will take some time. I don't think those are not something that can happen overnight or within 1 year, 2 years.
But are we on
track? There
track?
has to be consistent policies. Should be prepared, make it much more transparent, easier to do business, have systems open, less corruption and more efficient public service delivery, and let them make it easier to come in. Even tourism sector, I think there's a huge potential for tourism. But you need to manage the tourism in a sustainable way, in my view. I mean, I'm not expert on tourism sector. I'm sure there's a ministry, as a Ministry of Industries, who can focus on diversifying all these areas. And there are other ministries who can work on the tea, rubber, coconut, how to add more value there. Industries how can add more value into other supply chains, how we can link up with the other markets, with Asia or other areas. If there's a risk in the US market, how we can approach the markets, you need to negotiate free trade agreements with those markets. That's how if you compare a country like Vietnam, it has grown rapidly in terms of exports. I hear they had already have about 18 or 20 free trade agreements with other countries. We have only 3 or 4. So that's how these countries grown, because they have opened up the markets. They have more free trade than trade agreements and economic agreements with other countries. So that's how they increase market access. We can't have both. We can't have a market close at the same time. You can't expect exports and others to grow and capture the global market. So we need to go in that direction, in my view. That's how we can grow.
From trade, external sector and global integration, I also want to discuss that further, but coming back before we go in for a short break, about the general public, the people who feel the cost of living. You mentioned that earlier, but how would the central bank's policies going forward in 2026 would look at addressing any citizens or households' purchasing power that is being affected disproportionately?
No, you see, central bank policies are basically, our key mandate is price stability, which is maintaining low and stable inflation. That is the only way, and this is the only way that we can support and ease the cost of living by controlling inflation. Cost of living means at what rate the price levels are going up. That increases the cost of living. But for an economy, what we say inflation 5% means cost of living will have to go up around, right now is 2%. That is a sustainable increase in cost of living over a period of time. Or since the crisis, we had 70% at some point. Now it's only 0 to 1 to 2% now. Maximum could be 5%. The central bank mandate is to provide that mandate, deliver that mandate to maintain low and stable inflation. But how inflation means still cost of living going up. This is not, I mean, there kind of misperception that cost of living can be brought down. That is not correct. Once prices go up, it's difficult to bring it down on a long-term basis. Short-term, because supply and demand condition, drought and good harvest, some products prices can go up and down in short-term. But in the medium long-term, prices will not come down. Prices will be increasing at a steady pace, about 2, 3 or 5%. Then how do you question how people basically manage that situation? Only way for people by increasing their income, increasing the economic activities. That's what it is. It's about GDP growth. GDP growing at 5% means economic value of economic activities are growing by 5% every year. It means cost of living going up 5% means if the incomes are going up by 5%, that would compensate. So the central bank wouldn't have policies for the distribution policies. Central bank is not we don't have mandate. That is why a government fiscal policy, people who are earning more, they have right to collect more taxes from people who are earn more and support people who are earn less through distribution, through taxation. That's the only way to address certain section of the community if they are suffering from cost of living. For example, that is one of the reasons why this assessment. So poor people, as you said, can't afford this cost of living. This is the reason why government is using taxpayers' money to support that community, at least a support until they come out of this poverty level, support them with assessment like cash grants or cash support. That's how that can be addressed. But others who are above the poverty line is only by themselves, by growing themselves. Businesses should have to grow by themselves and earn high income. Individuals will have to work more and earn more so that they can compensate for high cost of living. Cost of living will anyway be increasing. The only way to address that is that your income should also be rising at the similar levels so that there will be compensation. So that's how any economy. This is important point because a lot of people think cost of living can be brought down. Prices
but
of
in the
goods,
long term, you can't.
Long term, no country, unless your deflation, which means Japan had this situation for 20, 30 years, deflation, means prices are coming down on a steady basis 20, 30 years. That's why economy grew by only 1 to 2% for a long period. That's not good for the economic growth. That will not increase the incomes of people of that country. That's not good. So this is why inflation is needed, smaller for 3 to 4, 5%. And at the same time, economy must grow, people's income must be growing to meet that additional increasing cost of living on a sustained basis, on a long-term basis.
Well, on that note, I think it's time we take a short break. We're discussing with the Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka whether Sri Lanka can protect hard-won stability and commit to long-term reform. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back. You're in conversation with the Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Nandalal Weerasinghe. We're talking about long-term consequences for Sri Lanka if structural reforms don't take shape right now as we begin 2026 with the first discussion of the central bank's monetary policy and way forward for 2026. We spoke about a number of areas that you suggested should be spurred in order to create that kind of activity. But Governor, based on central bank data and statistics, do you suggest expanding the social safety net, or is there any other way to bring more those who are more vulnerable into this social safety net, or is there a group that has to be targeted to bring in more tax revenue into the economy?
No, social safety net obviously, I mean, in income should be targeted. It should be given to people who deserve that support. So that's a difficult thing. You know, when you have this kind of system, social safety net, unless you target the people who deserve that support, or especially low-income people who can't live out of their income. So people pulling on poverty, especially after the crisis, a lot of people, early poverty rate was single digit, and it came down to, it increased to about 20-25% based on World Bank data. So because large number of people are now, larger number compared to before the crisis, are in the poverty. So obviously they should be targeted, but it should not be a continuous support forever. So this support targets should be given to people to come out of the poverty, give them an opportunity to join economic activities and make themselves empowered so that they can earn themselves, can stand by themselves to come out of this poverty. It has to be a temporary, well targeted for a short period, and within that period they should be empowered to come out of this poverty with creating a lot of economic activities. That is what any government should do. I am sure there's this, even Assassin program has this kind of a targeted mechanism. It has to be implemented properly. So our problem is that programs are there are procedures are there, whether those are properly implemented or not is a question. If that's are properly implemented, then obviously these supports are taxpayers' money. That mindful someone else is paying for this support. This is always what I say, government, they don't have money. Government responsibility is to collect money from someone else's and give it to someone else. Collect money from taxpayers and use that money properly, efficiently, and prudently to create economic activities, support people who need that support. That's someone else's money. So always there has to be a good accountability, responsibility of using taxpayers' money for any expenditure by the government.
I want to also take your attention to the IMF. We've been discussing much about the Extended Fund Facility Program, but just recently we saw the approval of about $206 million of rapid financing, an instrument to help Sri Lanka alleviate the fiscal pressures as a result of Cyclone Ditwah. So how is this going to really change the face of the IMF program, our commitments to the IMF, EFF, and what is the central bank's role also in terms of the spending and other governance aspects?
Now this are two instruments. One is RFI, is one that was used, and that's usually used in this kind of situation. It's called rapid financial instrument, is designed by the IMF to support member countries in an event of this kind of unexpected event. So that money come in without any conditions attached. No conditions, no commitment. 200 million was given to the government through central bank to support this activity. That's kind of a medium to long term, 3 to 5.5 years loan by to the RFI. But the existing external fund facility will remain. Why that was bit postponed, the completion of fifth review was postponed because when this was about to complete, the fifth review was about to complete on the 15th of December, this happened about 2 weeks before. So as a result, then government had to change their plan for 2026 because of this event. As a result, the earlier expectation fifth review would be completed within the month of December with the budget approved in the parliament as we agreed with the earlier commitments. But now the requirements had been changed. As a result, this also will have to be revised. There is no time for fifth review to be completed to have a proper assessment, have a proper approval from the parliament to spend that for next year. That's why it was completion of fifth review was postponed to early this year. And as in between RFI, rapid transit instrument is an easy instrument. They can deploy it within 2 weeks time, 2 weeks period. That was brought in as additional 200 million. This is in addition to EFF facility that was already committed. So then what next step would be to complete the fifth review based on the new budget for 2026, and that process will take place early next week. Then we'll go back to the normal cycle of EFF next fifth review. Then there are 8 reviews to be completed, 3 more reviews after the next review. Then that program can be completed and we can get full disbursement under the EFF. And in addition, this 200 million is additional support for the Ditwah. And also there could be a possibility of enhancing that facility also if this IMF program also we have to understand is not fixed for 4 years. Each and every review, there are negotiations taking place, there are reviews taking place, there are amendments and changes taking place. So even if you look at the fifth review that's going to be completed early this year, would be different from the fifth review that was going to be completed on 15th of December.
What would be the difference? Difference
between, so if that was approved in fifth review in December 15, that review did not have the additional 500 billion spending for this year for the cyclone recovery. So this one, the new review that we are going to negotiate, government and central bank is going to negotiate with the government, will have additional allocation for rebuilding and reconstruction of 500 billion for 2026. And even next year there could be some spending within the parameters of the program will be in next year. So that's why there are review by review, there are terms and conditions and commitment are being changed that should be suited for the circumstances. This is why some people think IMF, why do you want to go to the IMF, why do you want to commit, and why don't you renegotiate? There is a possibility of review and renegotiate. This best example is that review that was going to be completed last year, 15 December, review that will be completed within the first quarter of this year. Once you look at the difference, it will be totally different. There will be new review, new program or revised program for 2026 will be approved by the Executive Board in consultation with the Sri Lankan government and the central bank.
When are we expecting the review, Governor?
There will be a mission coming to discuss parameters in the month of January. I think about 20th of this period they will be here. And once they are here, we are trying to basically understand and discuss with them what are the new requirements for this year and how those are going to be spent, what are the, as a result of those impact, what will be the new reserve target, what will be the new fiscal policy, what will be the new revenue target, all will be renegotiated during at the month of January or February. Then it will need another 3-4 weeks to go to the board and get the final approval. So that's kind of a timeline, roughly.
Yes. The next question is external debt. We've been talking about pressures on the economy. We've been talking about 2027 and beyond, 2028 repayments. But now, as you mentioned, it's a case-by-case situation, and now we've faced a new natural disaster, post-disaster period. what kind of outlook do you see here in terms of debt repayment? We've heard many international economies also calling for an immediate halt to Sri Lanka's external debt repayments, warning that continued payments could push the country back into a financial crisis. Are you concerned?
This is completely a bad idea. I must say this is, they are also international academics and economists. Those have never been practiced and run a government, run a fiscal policy, run a monetary policy. That's the difference between academic looking at the papers and making a statement versus some people who are running the government, running the central banks and government, with the understanding of those situations are different. That's why this idea of, first point I want to make here is that with this cyclone impact, because government has clearly announced there's no new debt will be raised to finance, it has no impact on debt sustainability analysis. If there's going to raise additional debt as a result of this thing, then obviously there could be even significant marginal impact on the debt sustainability analysis, PSA. So why we restructure all this debt obligation of the government is to restore debt sustainability of Sri Lankan government. That has already been restored. That's why we are making the service payments annual basis. This year government made about $4 billion worth of foreign currency debt service payments. In next several years, debt service payments are going to be around 3 to 3.5, maximum 4 billion until 2032. That won't be changed. So what is the reason for us to justification for us to ask for another restructuring if DSA is not going to be affected? And it doesn't make any sense to anyone. Those who understand the subject properly, you have to ask for a restructuring if you are in a position that you are not being able to meet the debt service obligation. That is what happened in 2022. We did not have resources. Government didn't have revenues to service even domestic debt. As a result, government had to ask for debt restructuring because debt was not sustainable. IMF assessed Sri Lanka's government debt was not sustainable. So no one was willing to even give a loan to Sri Lankan government because debt was not sustainable. That's why we were negotiate a good restructuring program, restore the debt sustainability, and with this impact of this cyclone, government is going to use the savings they have without raising new debt. There will be no significant impact on the DSA. That's the first principle. Without having impact on DSA sustainability, what is the basis for us to ask for debt restructuring? There's no basis at all. If we are going to ask, this is something like, so you got a loan from the bank and you had the impact from the disaster, your part of the house was damaged. So then you have bank loan. Then this government give you a support, compensation to rebuild your part of that. Can you go to the bank and ask, please give me another loan? Does it make any sense? No. So if you had saved some money to build your house, and what is the point the bank saying that we'll give another support or we will write off your debt? Doesn't make any sense. If you come to a situation you are not in a position to repay your debt as a result of damage, you didn't have any savings to build that house again, then obviously bank will have to give you a restructuring. That's what we ask from the businesses to do that. This is same to country. It's the government saying they are not going to raise any additional debt for this done. They are going to use savings that was generated through revenues. Then there's no reason for us to go to the creditors and say that we are not in a position to service this debt. Debt service obligations are same as what was earlier. So what is just this group? I can remember this is the same group who were asking during our negotiations to negotiate to not to pay any debt. If that was a position in that time, Sri Lanka would never ever be able to go out and raise any debt for development in the future. I think raising debt is not a bad thing. Any country to prosper, any business to prosper, any business to grow, you need to borrow. The prudent thing is to you borrow, invest in prudently and generate income for you to further grow. If you borrow and waste your money, then no one will give you money again. That is not the prudent borrowing. Borrowing is not a bad thing. Any country or any business should borrow to grow. If you borrow and waste your money, then no one will give you again money. There's no point of asking for restructuring. No one will even restructure that. That is the point. And this is a bad idea. I don't think any sensible government should even talk about this. No restructuring again. Again, restructuring means, I don't think any case, when creditor point of view, they look at whether we have capacity to repay. When we say we have $6 billion, when we say we are in fiscal consolidation, when we say inflation control, what is the reason for us to ask for debt, debt forgiveness or debt restructuring again? That means we are going back to the lower rating. It will take another 3-4 years for us to complete the negotiations, and we will go back to a worse situation than what the progress we have been making last 2-3 years. That's going to be, I think, is not the group. I don't know what the intentions are. To me, intentions are not to help the country. Intentions are basically with the intention of going back to a worse situation than what we are going forward.
In the interest of time, Governor, I just have one question, but a few areas. You mentioned external debt. I want to know whether we are in a comfortable space to manage our debt, and whether Sri Lanka has been successful in building creditor trust going forward, and also the policy space, monetary policy space, as well as the policy space in the country, how conducive it is going to be in 2026 as we look at the necessary structural reforms for the economy.
No, this debt situation, I want to make it very clear that a lot of talk about 2028, we have to pay a lot more debt and there will be another restructuring, another bank. There's a whole kind of a misperception and misunderstanding, maybe for not being able to understand properly, but have understanding but trying to mislead people. So the whole purpose of restructuring governments are in obligations. That was completed in 2023, 2024, and now the last stage of even Sri Lankan Airlines, was a small part that was left, has already been now almost finalized. With that, whole debt resolution process will be fully complete. Because of this, up to now almost 95% completed, we were now came out of the default category of ratings out to CCC plus now. Next step, I would expect soon, our rating will go back to B grade. On the CCC to next is one notch is a B. That is the direction we need to move. I think that fully completion of debt restructuring process. And also going forward and building our resource continuously from 6 billion, 7 to 8 billion. And our debt service obligation currently for next 10 years is around annual basis 2.75, 3 billion, 3.25. Even after starting to pay small capital payments from 2028 onwards, it will be 4 billion or 4.2 billion maximum annual basis. If we build resource up to 10 billion or 10, 12, 13 billion, for us to service annual 4-5 billion is not a situation, not a difficult situation, not a situation. That's why I am confidently say, if we move in the same direction, the way that we have been moving the last 3 years after the crisis, I have no concern at all for the debt service payments of the government, external debt service payments, or even domestic debt service payments. That's not a concern. So there's no one should be worried about having other restructuring or another default in next 2-3 years time if we move in the right direction. Obviously, if we change the course, there are a lot of others. That's why subject to that, we can easily meet those debt service obligations. So for that, we need to continue with the fiscal consolidation path. We need to build continuously the external resource in terms of official resource. we have to maintain inflation, fiscal monetary policy space, and maintain inflation and maintain low interest rates, maintain a stable exchange rate, which is competitive and also flexible and market determined. As long as those key principles are in place, I am not at all concerned about our country's or government ability to meet a service obligation beyond 2028 until even next 10 years. 2032 is the period that we have restructured government debt obligations.
Thank you, Governor, for your time to make time for this very important national conversation. And I think on that note, we set the tone for 2026 going forward. We look forward to talking to you as the outlook, central bank outlook for 2026 is announced too. But most importantly, thank you very much on the 1st of January 2026 for allocating your time.
Thank you for the invitation, Indeewari.
Well, we were in conversation with the Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Nandalal Weerasinghe, talking about Sri Lanka's hard-won gains, long-term stability, and how the next phase of development and reform will take shape as we step into year 2026. Thank you for joining us here at Hyde Park. Have a pleasant evening and a great year ahead. Good night.